I know that John Kerry, when President Obama was inaugurated the second time, I went to Washington to attend the inauguration ceremony, and that morning, John Kerry and his wife spent the morning in the hotel room with me and my wife. He knew he was going to be Secretary of State, and he promised me that he was going to reopen the effort to bring peace to the Middle East, and he's done a heroic job, I think. And I was hoping that even this past year, when the process became more and more dismal, that John Kerry would take a final step, supported by President Obama, to say, okay, I have not been successful in getting the Israelis and the Palestinians to agree on my proposals, but this is my best proposal that they have rejected. And let the world see what Kerry and his advisors believe is a proper solution. And then let the Palestinians or the Israelis say, we're not going to accept it, which would be very difficult for them. But we have chosen not to do it. So I think the only way now to break the deadlock that exists, or the lack of any lock at all, between the Palestinians and the Israelis, is for the United States to let the world know this is what we believe is the best solution, which is not going to be liked by either side, and then let the two adversaries take the consequences of rejecting what's a fair and honest solution. That's what I think needs to be done. But have no authority. Also, with no authority goes no responsibility.
Next question or two from women, please.
But it's not a hopeless case. It's still. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir, and thank you. I'm in Dr. Franklin's class, and in reading White House diaries, I was particularly struck, and I revisited several times, your time in Camp David with Begin and Sadat. And the question I have is about a personal formation piece within you. How the leader of the free world goes to the head of the Jewish people and is shuttling back and forth messages to the sword of Allah. I kept imagining the egos and what was at stake, and how I was struck by the humility it took to negotiate peace in that space after they had decided they weren't speaking to each other, and you are shuttling back and forth to different cabins. And then this insight, I felt it was the power of God that gave you, that where you now wrote the stuff out to the grandkids and Begin softened. I really want insight into what was going on within you.
Well, that's a long story, I think. Well, when I got to Camp David, the first thing we did was to have a common prayer. It was developed by some people in Washington, and they sent me a text for the whole world to pray. And I was blessed, and the world was blessed by three people who were deeply religious with different faiths. And Begin was the first prime minister who was really deeply religious. The rest of them were basically secular. Sadat had a brown spot on his forehead that he had obtained over a lifetime of bowing down with his head on the ground, praying to Allah. And I was a Christian. So we prepared, eventually got Begin to agree to the text, and we asked the world to pray, and the whole world was praying for it. But I think that the reason that we didn't reach an agreement ultimately was because all three of us had a basic faith. And we had three different worship services in the same little room at different times of the week. Fortunately, we had different days of the week. But anyhow, that was what we did. But Begin and Sadat were completely incompatible. And for the first 3 days, I had them come to my cabin, to one room by myself in the cabin. And my wife used to be very concerned every night when we came out of it there whether we had blood on our faces. Because they couldn't agree on anything. They despised each other. And they would either talk about the 4 wars that had taken place in the last 25 or 30 years between them, where they killed each other's children and that sort of thing. Or if they ran out of that argument, they would go back to 2,000 years or 4,000 years and talk about ancient history, between whether who built the pyramids, was it the Jews in captivity, or did the Arabs help build the pyramids, things like that. Anyway, after 3 days, I decided they shouldn't see each other again. So through at Camp David 10 more days, they never saw each other. I kept them apart, and I went to Begin, and then while he went to sleep, I went to talk to Sadat, and back and forth, and I had what was known as a single document that I used. I had exactly the same document with bracketed sentences, and every time I would get them to agree on something, I could remove the brackets. But they both knew I was preaching from the same text. And I had another thing to put pressure on them. I had them to agree at the beginning that when we got through at Camp David, if we failed, which we thought we might very well do, that I would make public the final proposal I made, and if one of them agreed to it and the other one didn't, I would let the world know that was the person that kept peace from coming to the That's what I just mentioned a few, which I think ought to be done again. Anyway, that's what we did. But it was a matter of great courage on the part of Prime Minister Begin. He showed more courage than Sadat or I, because he had more to give up. And he had been in the underground, as you know, and so forth, and he was protected by very close friends who were not at Camp David with him. But he knew he had to answer to them when he got back home. And so he made concessions that were much more difficult for him than I didn't have to make any concessions, but than Sadat made. Sadat was so self-assured that he didn't really fear consequences. He was very courageous. And of course, he was assassinated just a few months after I left the White House by people who didn't agree with what he said. But Begin was very courageous. But I think all three of us had a religious motivation to try to bring peace. I'll let you.
Maybe one from this side.
Yeah. I don't have any preference.
Hi, President Carter.
Hi.
You mentioned previously that our nation has been at war more than any other nation on earth.
Yeah.
And so my question is, what are some practical steps that we can take to build a culture of peace and to start to change that reality?
Well, the reason we go to war so much is because the American people want to go to war. It's a very attractive thing for a president to do, politically speaking. And we sometimes put military conflict at the top of our priority list in addressing complicated issues. I'll just give you one quick example just to illustrate. Before I became president, we were in bed with all the military dictatorships in this hemisphere. And whenever one of them was threatened by indigenous Indians or by former slaves or by very poor people, the United States would send out U.S. Marines or Army troops down to protect the dictator, because quite often they had attended West Point, and their kids were going to American colleges, and they spoke English fluently. And also they were giving a lot of American business people profits by special deals on iron ore and copper and bananas and pineapples and so forth. So it was up to our nation's economic benefit to support the dictators. And so we stopped that. But they had military dictatorships in a lot of countries, in Peru and in Ecuador and in Argentina and Chile and in Uruguay and Paraguay and Brazil. You know, you can go up down the list. And by the end of 10 years, just by letting people have the ability to speak out and using U.S. influence, all of those military dictatorships changed into democracies. But we used to go to war as a top priority. And we still do that too much. And there's a lot of pressure on Obama now, as you know, to go to war, with John McCain and others that I need not mention, saying we need to have more military and so forth. But I think that there ought to be a top priority of trying to resolve problems without the application of military force. And this is not an easy thing to do. And because there's a lot of profit to be made in going to war. So where is the cadre of people to start, as Christians, you know, we worship the Prince of Peace, as I already said. But many of our Christian brothers and sisters are in the forefront of saying we need to take military action. And it also derives from a conviction, which I have a hard time not sharing, that Americans are somehow superior. That when we say something should be done, that the Iraqis should do it, or the Afghanistan should do it, or the Syrians should do it, or the Sudanese should do what we say. We just had a conference at the Carter Center this week, and one of our young women, there's a medical doctor from Tripoli, and Libya, and she told me when she got through with her testimony, she couldn't go back home because she wouldn't be permitted back in the country. So, you know, we need to be a country, I would say, we need to be a superpower. And a superpower not in just how much military capability we have, but we need to be a superpower in the fact that whenever anybody on earth has a potential conflict or civil war or disagreement with their neighbors, their natural tendency should be, let's go to Washington. Because Washington, America, people believe in peace. Or they should say, why don't we go to America because they believe in human rights. Or they believe in being generous to poor people. You know, that should be the definition of superpower. But to use your word, it brings in an element of humility. You know, I'm not preaching to you, but I'm just saying this is what we should think about. But where is the commitment to peace? Ostensibly, it's among Christians, right? But we don't speak out.
Mr. President, we're starting to wrap up. I didn't want this assembly to depart without at least hearing hello, hear the voice of President Laney. Could you just say hello, stand if you get the mic, and then I'm going to pose a very quick question, Mr. President, and ask you who your favorite theologian is.
Who's your favorite theologian? I just want to say, listening to President Carter today makes me realize how blessed we are here at Emory to be associated with him and to have the Carter Center in Atlanta and to know why he is a hero to so many of us. Thank you very much.
There are a lot of wonderful theologians, some still living. One just died recently, as a matter of fact. It's been down in my home. I won't go into detail about that. But I would say Reinhold Niebuhr is my favorite. I've got more books about Reinhold Niebuhr and by him than any other one. And I've quoted him in some of my other books. He says, you know, the purpose of our life is to bring justice to a sinful world, which is what I've been trying to talk about this afternoon. Reinhold Niebuhr. He was a practical theologian. He knew that you had to use authority and strength sometimes to implement, I'd say, Christian principles, but that we should emphasize the peaceful approach.
Let me take this opportunity to thank President Carter, thank President Laney and Berta Laney. Thanks Rich Landers, all the students who served as ushers today, and to Steve Huckman for making this possible. This is a historic moment. We'll remember this many years from now. Mr. President, thank you for giving us hope. We pray for you and your family. Ladies and gentlemen, please bear with us. The President and his guests will take a photograph here. He will not be able to linger, and his escort will need to lead him out afterwards. We thank you so much for your cooperation today.